I am Pierre Lumumba here at the Maruba Dam in Machakos County in the Republic of Kenya, here in the continent of Africa. And we continue our conversations. And today we want to look at the media in the days of the struggle for independence. You know, many times one is amazed at the manner in which those who are in the struggle for independence were able to articulate their views in a manner that was consumable by the population. It must be remembered that in many African countries, of course, which were created after the partition of Africa, the levels of literacy was very low. The population that was able to read and write were the elite. Whether the people who had conquered were the Portuguese or the British or the Italians or the Germans or the French, the levels of literacy were very low, which called into question, how do you communicate? In fact, when the struggle started, even the television was unknown. The only medium that was known was the radio, which did not even use what we now know as FM radio waves. This was the reality of the continent of Africa, and yet communication had to be undertaken. And one must go rather deep because the struggle for independence had started in earnest outside of the continent of Africa. And in the Caribbean, individuals such as Sylvester Williams of Trinidad and Tobago, who had gone to Europe, were already publishing newsletters which were talking about the need for freedom. These newsletters were circulated to Africans who were studying in the United States. It is in that context, for example, that as early as the year 1906, an individual such as Pixley Kaisaka Seme, who in 1912 was one of the three individuals who founded the African National Congress, is already publishing a newsletter. And his famous speech, The Regeneration of Africa, then circulates around the continent, informing the speeches of people who are in the continent of Africa, informing the speeches of individuals such as Marcus Garvey in Jamaica. And when that happened, these newspapers and newsletters are then smuggled. When the struggle for the civil rights movement starts in the United States of America, individuals such as W.E.B. Du Bois are individuals who are publishing newsletters, and these newsletters form the basis of some of the early thoughts in the African continent. Individuals such as Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy are already reading and using the medium of newsletters as a way of communication and as a way of sensitizing individuals. When Kwame Nkrumah goes to Lincoln University in the United States of America, he meets Nnamdi Azikiwe, who then becomes the president of Nigeria, independent Nigeria, and they are using newsletters. So newsletters become a major medium for communication, because the colonialist does not want any communication to take place amongst the people. When the Pan-African Congress is held in Manchester in 1945, newsletters are then used. And it is instructive that in Manchester there are a number of key African leaders who then come back to start the propagation of the struggle for independence. And the president at that time in Manchester is Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Obafemi Awolowo of Nigeria, and Hastings Kamuzubanda of what was then known as Nyasaland. When Nkrumah comes, he established the Accra Times in Ghana. And the Accra Times becomes one of the media via which these particular messages are articulated. But it's important to say that in Sierra Leone, they had already started publishing the Royal Gazette. And in places such as Liberia, you had different newspapers. In 1958, Nkrumah is already publishing newspapers. In Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser is already publishing these newsletters. And of course, in the East African region, in Kenya specifically, the Standard newspaper, which is founded in 1902, is already beginning to talk about the struggle for independence. We therefore see that the written word is used to good effect, but only amongst the elite. Because how many people are reading? How many people can read? The rest of the population that you want to marshal is not a reading population. And it is worse in certain countries, in certain colonized countries such as the Portuguese colonies, where the reading population is very small. So in Angola, in Mozambique, in Guinea-Bissau, in Cabo Verde, the reading population is very small. And even in the French colonies, the reading population is very small. And that is why the radio becomes a very useful instrument. And we see the use of the radio in a very effective way, particularly in Southern Africa. When South Africa becomes officially under the control of the apartheid regime in 1948 of Hendrik Verwoerd, everything is banned. The written word is banned. And that is how the African National Congress creates the Freedom Radio. The Freedom Radio is a subterranean radio medium which sometimes has to steal frequency. They then become known in that particular region as the guerrilla radio stations. And the people who use them to good effect are in Mozambique. In Mozambique, Eduardo Mondlane, Samora Moises Machel are being parasitic upon these frequencies, and they use coded language through these guerrilla radio stations. That is also happening in Namibia. It is also happening in Angola, and it is also happening in parts of West Africa. So the radio becomes an important medium. And the reason why the radio is very important, as I've already indicated, is because the bulk of the population is not literate. And you want to talk to them in the language that they understand. So some of these stations are actually broadcasting not in English, not in French, but in languages that are understood by the people. Of course, the guerrilla radio stations in places such as Mozambique uses Portuguese quite a bit because it is a unifying language in that regard. But there is something that is also very important, and this I've always found ironical, that Germany, Radio Deutsche Welle, which was one of the colonizers, becomes a rather important player in this particular space. Radio Deutsche Welle establishes one of the very early Kiswahili services, and Radio Moscow also becomes a very important tool, particularly for the elite. At that time, of course, we are talking about the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is in the forefront of the struggle for independence by helping the African leaders to propagandize. And it is not lost on me that is during this period also, particularly late in the 1960s, that the Patrice Emery Lumumba Friendship University is established, and it becomes what one may describe as the ideological mecca for many of the leaders who then become very important in the struggle for independence in the continent of Africa. You see the power of the radio in that regard. And Patrice Emery Lumumba Friendship University sees quite a number of people. They move to the east, and you find many people who are then encouraged to join the struggle through the radio. China is also involved in that regard. And China then, of course, is important also through the radio. So when one looks at the media at that time, the primary media of communication to the people is number one, the newspaper. And Nkrumah speaks about it quite soundly. First in 1948, and secondly, of course, in 1958, and is telling the people that in order to communicate in a multi-ethnic environment, the levels of literacy must be given pride of place so that people can read what is being circulated by the leaders. But the newspapers can only take you so far because the cost of printing is high, the people who can circulate it and the colonialists are also capable and always ready to seize the newspaper. And that is why the radio, as number two, becomes the darling of many of these individuals. And to the extent that most of it was shortwave, it was possible for it to fly into different parts of the country and to have the leader speak directly to the people. You can note that even when Kwame Nkrumah is overthrown, and even prior to that, people like Ahmed Sékou Touré are using the media from Guinea. So you see radio stations in Guinea, in Ghana, in South Africa, or outside of South Africa, in Mozambique, in Kenya. You also have vernacular, and I use the word vernacular very deliberately. You begin to find newspapers that are published in the local languages, such as the Agikoyo language, such as the Luo or the Luo language, such as the Akamba language. Because the other idea is that you are communicating to the people in the language that they understand. So when we summarize the media that is used in the struggle for independence to propagate and to spread necessary and useful propaganda in order to energize the population, the weapon of choice, if you may, was the radio. The weapon of choice was the radio, which was effective in communicating not only the message, but also the emotions of the people. And it is important also to say that friends of goodwill were developed during that period. And that is why you find even today that in countries such as China and Russia, Kiswahili occupied an important place. And this was particularly because of Julius Kambarage Nyerere of Tanzania, who was in the forefront. And that is why Nyerere is normally referred to as Mwalimu, because he used the medium of the radio to detribalize Tanzania and to inculcate the sense of patriotism, which then fueled the engine of decolonization in the manner that we know it today. The story that is being told here, that the word, to be biblical or to be religious about it, in the beginning there was the word, and the word had to be spread. The word was about freedom, and it was spread through the written word and spread through the spoken word, and the radio was the important tool. In those days, there was no television. It was the radio, and that became the king of communication. And behold, most African countries enjoy some kind of independence, even if it is not total, because of the newspaper and because of the spoken word through the radio. And it is not lost on me that the message of total independence continues apace. What we are doing now through RT is a continuation of the journey that started in the 18th century, that the word must be spoken and it's being given its practical meaning and it is being heard throughout the world, because the message of total freedom is still alive in the continent of Africa. So hail the word and behold the word. Thank you very much. We are talking about Africa and our independence and the journey towards our independence. We'll continue our conversations on these issues at a later time. Meanwhile, thank you and see you again.
The world is changing, and so is Africa's reality. Political shifts, new partnerships, and economic opportunities. And we're here to uncover why and how it's done. What do the billion-dollar IMF loans have to do with the Kenyan unrest? Are US and French troops actually withdrawing from African states after years of presence? Is Europe's so-called green agenda so green and helpful after all? Why are more and more African countries increasing trade with Russia? And how is Britain lending Africa the treasures London looted? Now, from colonial legacies and security to the future of African democracies, we break down the key challenges ahead and analyze the solutions. While the world is watching Africa, tune in with us and question more with RT International on Maisha TV Kenya.
Problem number one is leadership in Africa.
What can we do for Africa? That was a wrong question. The right question was, what can we do with Africa?
What Africa do we want?
Africa had to seek first the political kingdom, and the rest would be given unto them. Unfortunately, we sought and obtained the political kingdom, but there is still a debate as to whether the rest has been given unto us.
Half of our people here are below 20 years old. Yes? Look at the average age of our presidents. Is about 63, 64 years old. We're the only continent in the world where we have presidents at 90 years old, starting new terms. I mean, you guys are crazy or what?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mushabi Jr. on your screen, bringing to you a program called Maisha Talk. This is where we build your capacity to achieve your dreams and visions. One thing I've learned in life is nobody can ever tell you that you can never be anything or achieve anything in this world. Shut them down. You can achieve anything in this world. And in this program, that is what we are talking about. Principles, attitudes, belief systems, where you are going to gain a lot. You're better off than anybody who's not going to watch this program. This is going to change your life. It's big, it's fun, it's educating, it's entertaining. Right here on Maisha Television, where you choose it, you watch it, and you definitely love it.
This keeps me going. On those days when I feel like giving up. Fire.
Do not want the money or properties achieved in a corrupt way.
Badala ya kusaidia watoto wadogo wadogo katika academies za sport, wewe kazi yako imekuwa kila weekend unakuja kwa matanga kutukana viongozi. Wewe ni waziri wa michezo ama waziri wa matanga na masuala za ndani.
Sasa wewe unatuambia nini? This government is going to punish you more than they will punish me.
Tuko na mheshimiwa Eugene, tuko na mheshimiwa Lusaka na mheshimiwa Wetangula.
I have no problem. I have full confidence in the agencies that we have to do their job. People are out there bandying my brother yesterday. Me, I've said, if he's guilty, aendelee.
Lakini hata nyinyi mkuwe na mshike rada. Sasa nyinyi wakati ya kufanya kazi mnasema tafuta Ruto, lakini siku ya kupiga kura mnaniambia tipping. Sasa nyinyi kweli mko na plani?
We invite you to like Maisha TV Kenya on all our online media platforms. Facebook at Maisha TV Kenya, Twitter at Maisha TV Kenya, Instagram at Maisha TV Kenya. Maisha TV now invites you to send your feedback or complain because we listen to you. You can now reach us on all our media platforms on Maisha TV. Just send your messages to our social media platforms, call or text us on 0746 999 841 or send us an email to info@maishatv.co.ke. We care. We shall respond to your feedback or complaints within 14 days. Also, keep a copy of messages sent to us. We listen to you because you listen and you watch us. Maisha TV. Choose it, watch it, and love it.
I am Piero Lumumba here at the Manzoni Wildlife Estate in Machakos County in our Republic of Kenya in our continent of Africa, and we continue to discuss diverse aspects of African society. And what we focus on today is the leopard societies. You know, the leopard has a unique history in many African societies. It is one of the bigger of the cats, if you may. It is spotted, it is nimble, it is an animal that has claws, it has unique eyes, and in African societies, there were secret societies. And this society, the one that we focus on, is the leopard. The leopard society were particularly known in the countries that we now refer to as Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Niger, and even as far as Nigeria. It is what they did that was only known to the initiated. In other words, you had to be a member of it. And there were many of them. If you went to different countries, you'd have the Poro, the Sande, the Ekpe, the Ogboni societies. And they were informed by certain clear rules. First of all, there was the fact that they were the ones that gave authority. Even where there was royal authority, these secret societies, that is the word or the terminology we will use, were societies that remained the anchors. And invariably, one knew that whoever was a monarch in some way had some affiliation with one of these societies. Number two, it was initiation into adulthood. Not in that sense that if you are a member of a society and you are now moving into the next stage of life, there are certain secrets of the clan, secrets of the society to which you would be initiated, and you would then become a member who could be trusted with information. Number three, it was also a preservation of the culture and tradition of the communities, because these were the custodians of the culture and the traditions of the societies. Number four, there are issues of spirituality of these communities which had to be made known to only very few. And number five, it was create order and loyalty amongst people who are the anchors of the society. This can be described as having been the code of many of these societies. And in order to ensure that the societies were kept in check, they were bound by oaths. So that if you had been initiated into any of these secret societies, you become the recipient and therefore the repository of certain knowledge which should only be known to the initiated few. And what did you do? You swore. And when you made these oaths, there were penalties. And in societies also, there were times when there was war. How did you immunize yourself against enemies? And this is why I think later in time, when the colonialists came, they were saying that these were societies that were heathen. These were societies that were engaged in ritual killing. These were societies that were engaged in cannibalism. These were societies that were engaged in anti-social activities because they did not understand their modus operandi. But the truth be told, depending on which society one belonged to, there were times when you swore against an enemy. And there are societies in those parts of the world where if you were engaged in war and you captured an individual, then you would possibly eat portions of the parts of the body of an individual, the heart, possibly. The heart was a favorite thing. You eat somebody's heart, and once you've eaten somebody's heart, then you become bold. You are emboldened. You fear nothing. You no longer fear blood. These were initiation ceremonies, and they also, in order to embolden them and to give them the strength that they needed, or so they believed, and because they were initiated into the leopard society, they also would capture leopards and use their claws. And remember, the leopard's claws are very important in terms of this secrecy, because the leopard's claws are never exposed. They recede, and in this way, whenever they went into their killing sprees, if you may, they would scratch places, and some believed that actually these are individuals who could shift. They could change into leopards. So if they went into a place and they find somebody had been killed and then there were scratches which were leopard scratches, you would believe that these are indeed unique beings. So part of the reason why this thing was done is that there were societies which were steeped in mysticism. And mysticism was very useful in terms of ensuring that the society respected them, perhaps feared them, perhaps revered them, perhaps even dealt with them as if they were totally different beings. And let us be very clear that although it is the men who dominated these societies, there were societies which were secret, which were also women's societies. The Sande, for example, who are to be found to be operating in areas such as Sierra Leone, was a women's secret society. And what they did is that they used these societies for purposes of initiation and even training. And I think it is important to talk about this. You may say that there were no schools. Today, when we think about many societies, we think about royalty, and the royalty have their own special school. And you see it in different civilizations. If you look at civilizations such as in India, you read books such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, you see princes being trained in special schools. There were special schools among secret societies in Africa. And this is where you are trained in warfare. This is where you are trained in tradition. This is where you are trained in spiritual mysticism. This is where you are trained on how to deal with the women if you are men. How do you deal with women? How do you deal with different clans? And if it was a women's society, how do you deal with men? So these were, in a manner of speaking, academies of sorts. So their education aspect must never be ignored. Number two, their martial aspect must also never be ignored, because some of them were the societies which came up with things which will define how the society would defend itself from other communities. And then, to the extent that the royalty also required to be kept in check, these were the societies at which people who are governing societies would be summoned and would be required to account. So in terms of social cohesion, these societies were very critical and they were very useful. And when the colonialists started arriving into that part of the world, it is these societies that became the prefects, if you may, and the preservers of culture and tradition. It is these societies that were able to tell the people, we are confronting a new people, a people who want to change our culture, a people who want to change our religion, a people who want to change our laws, a people who want to change the ways in which we are doing our things. We must preserve our culture and tradition. And for that reason, in secret, even when the colonialists were doing what they were doing, it is these societies that assisted in ensuring that culture and tradition was preserved, even if that was done in a subterranean way. It is for that reason, therefore, that when the colonialists started taking root and enacting laws, they said that these were witch doctors and that they were steeped in witchcraft, that they were steeped in cannibalism, that they were steeped in ritual killing, that they were engaged in activities which were inimical to civilization. And for that reason, in the 20th century, we now begin to see an onslaught on secret societies. And this onslaught is mounted not only by the French or the British, it is mounted by colonialists and even by missionaries. Because missionaries are saying that in order to be true Christians, you cannot continue to belong to things which are satanic. But that was not the truth. The truth was that these were the preservers of a people's culture. These were individuals who belonged to societies whose reason for existence was to protect their communities. And in any event, when we look at the value of the early resistance, it will be appreciated that, in fact, it is these societies that preserved many of the cultures and traditions that we now see as manifesting themselves as latter-day kingdoms, latter-day in the sense that they are a manifestation of what used to happen in the kingdoms in Sierra Leone, in the kingdoms in Nigeria, in the kingdoms in Mali, in the kingdoms in La Côte d'Ivoire. It is as a result of these secret societies, which, as I've said, were characterized as leopard. And this leopard is simply a name to define how secretive they were and how effective they were, and their societies, which, when the debate is long concluded, it may very well be said that they were not secret societies, but societies with secrets, whose main agenda was to ensure that culture, tradition was preserved. They were the bulwark against the colonization of peoples bodily and spiritually. That is the leopard societies that existed in that part of the world. Africa never ceases to amaze. Thank you very much. As we continue with our debates on the continent of Africa, we are covering all. As we've said before, the good, the bad, and the ugly is the subject of our discourse. But we'll come back again to continue this conversation. Thank you.